So, hi, Alexis. What I found recently is a black shirt with Java minus jar glassfish.jar.
Oh,
And I remember the event. It was, I think, Community One, or I think it was Community One. And I couldn't understand that because, okay, what's going on here with glassfish? It is already small enough, and now it's like something has to be optimized, and I couldn't get it. So we have a chat. And then I remember you actually, that you distributed the t shirts. And
mhm.
then the next time, what I remember then is I met you first time at Java One, and it was like you came to me and gave me something, a gift, and I didn't knew you at all. I blocked something about Glassfish, what I used at my work, and you were, I think, the community manager, right?
Right. I mean, the term doesn't sound awesome nowadays because community manager is used for many different things. But yeah, I was part of the engineering team, and I was kind of the outbound face of it, working with managers internally, and yeah, with the community externally. A lot of people called it developer relations nowadays, but that was pretty much it. Yep.
Ah, okay. So developer relations is the community manager, right?
Yeah, I mean, people can, it's like even developer manager, I'm sorry, developer advocate versus evangelist. That's a long conversation all by its own. So
Okay.
it's the same kind of thing. But yeah, I remember that T-shirt very well. Yeah, Java Glassfish was a big part of my life for a number of years.
Yeah. And what I did, I looked you up at LinkedIn, and I found out that you started at Sun, and then you were like a pre-sales manager. And what I didn't expect it. So what I thought, you are a developer. So now the question after all these years, can you actually write Java code?
I try to keep up with all the things that have appeared in Java recently, but I joined Google 6 years ago, and it wasn't specifically to keep writing Java code. That was more. It was important for me to be part of a community so I can relate to other communities. And joining Google, I got to meet and work with the Android community, with the Python community, with the Go community. So that helped me quite a bit. I did start writing less Java code. I'm trying to get back to it, to be honest. I still think of myself as a developer. Whether that's true or not remains to be seen.
So this is actually interesting because regarding to your resume, you are not a developer. So there is like are you a coder or not? So you understand code and you can code, right?
Yes.
So this is
Yeah.
what I remember. This is what I remember because I saw your LinkedIn resume, and this was like you are pre-sales manager, and it's like, yeah, okay, but as I remember, you understand the code well, and you attended my sessions and gave me feedback. So it's like strange.
No, well, so I mean, all of my life, I've been all of my career, I've been talking to developers, and if you want to talk to developers, you need to speak their language, and it's even better if you're one of them. So I try to be one of them. I try to be a developer myself. Yes, I can code. I would typically not do a presentation without a demo because I can and showing code, not just clicking buttons. Um, so yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes.
Okay, but then I
But,
can
but
ask you the question, my usual question. What is your first Hello World? When was it and what was it?
oh, my first Hello World was not a Hello World. Back in the days, I was my dad had bought a Texas Instrument A4 4A something. I forgot, to be honest. It was kind of a gaming device, but you could also program in BASIC. And the first thing I did was draw a circle on the screen. That
Wow.
was first Hello World. Yeah. I don't know if it qualifies as trigonometry, but it was a lot of fun. I spent a lot of time on that machine.
How old were you?
Um, this was it was I don't know 10,
Wow.
something like that.
So I was 12. I got ZX Spectrum, and my first line of code was RAM. And I thought something happens, and RAM in BASIC was like the comment. You remember
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah.
And I've wrote a
Remember.
lots of RAM, and nothing happened, and I really became angry. And the problem was I couldn't understand the manual. It was in French for unknown reasons, so I only had the source code, but I couldn't read, what's supposed to do. So I remember spending the whole day writing RAMs, and then I got the idea what's programming about is just writing RAMs, and then you can have animations on the screen or something like this. And then I think I didn't even had Hello World. So after I was a programmer, I found out that Hello World is a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea what Hello World
Yeah,
was
but
until
the
I.
circle is sophisticated with basic. There was not even a graphic. So this is actually interesting. So I think there was the calculator, right? The Texas Instruments.
That's what they had, but mine was like a real computer. I mean, it had a real
Okay.
keyboard and it had cartridges, and I would record or save my programs on tape.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. This is what I did as well with.
Um,
Okay. And then Java.
yes.
When
Oh,
was you?
that's still a big part of my life. And I mean, I'm just back from DevOps, which is this big conference in Europe for Java, as you probably know. I started Java right out of school. I got an internship with the French National Space Agency. I was supposed to rewrite a Prolog application in Java as an applet of all things, running in Netscape, whatever the version was at the time. And nobody knew Java. It was like they're like, how about we have an intern work on it and present his findings? Maybe it's something interesting. So I did that for a good number of months, like 5 or 6, and I really loved it. I found it really interesting. This was my really first experience with a object-oriented programming language. Before that, I had done in school a lot of Fortran, C, Pascal, and Java. Really, it was a lot of things. I mean, it was the internet, it was object-oriented programming, it was user interfaces. It was AWT back in the days, but it actually kind of worked. Especially within applets, the kind of is important. But that was really very exciting. And of all things, then I went to do a master's degree in California for a year, and coming back, I got a job working at Sun Microsystems, which was a dream job for me, really. I mean, that was like if you could do that, that's not really work. I mean, it's like using something you love and writing programs. I did a lot of UI development in the early days, Swing in the early days. Had a lot of fun with that.
That interesting. So what interests me, what the applet was about. So what was on the screen after a month of working? So what you did with the applet. So what was the functionality?
Oh, okay. So it was something that was about calculating MTTR, mean time to recovery, and MTBF, mean time between failure of components.
Mm-hmm.
So on the screen, I had the ability to wire components together. And
Wow.
based on how they were wired, I would come up with those numbers.
It is pretty sophisticated, actually.
Yes and no. I mean, if I look at how much I achieved in 5 months, I spent more time playing with Java, understanding it and learning it than actually writing the code. But it was an amazing experience. I really loved it. I don't know if the organization there started using Java really after I left, but at least I give them a sense of what it was, and that's, I guess, what they were looking for.
Still amazing. I know actually projects which took for 5 months and nothing come out. So they're like just talking. So you were.
Well, I had to present something. That was my degree was on the line.
Okay, and how Sun approached you?
Actually, I started Sun was starting what they called a Java Center of Excellence or something like that. Sun invented Java, and then you know how it works. Somebody invents something, and the rest of the company doesn't really realize the potential of it, and eventually customers start asking, this Java thing, can you help me with this? And locally, I mean by that, not in California, but everywhere else in the world, customers started asking Sun for expertise, and they had none. I mean, Sun is a hardware company, was a hardware company, I would argue until the end. But they're like, hey, we have professional services, and people are asking us not for Solaris installs or upgrades or whatever, but for Java expertise. Maybe we should start, a team doing that. So that's what I joined And
But how they found you?
how did that happen?
It's always interesting to know.
I think actually this started through a small company that was providing Sun locally here in France with system and administrators, and they advertised a job. So my first job was as a contractor through that small company, and I found the company that was advertising. They were working with Sun, and I don't think they even mentioned Java, but I don't actually
Okay.
remember the whole thing. But Sun to me was JavaSoft Sun. By the way, amazing interview with Scott. I listened
Okay.
to it last week. I loved it. It was just so many things I could relate to. Anyways,
Uh-huh.
yeah, Sun, JavaSoft, that was like a dream company to me. There weren't that many. Maybe IBM at the time was still very high up on the list for me.
uh, Regarding the interview with Scott, yeah, I asked Scott several times how is this possible because to me he was like he's a really businessman. You heard about that, right?
Yeah.
But he had the unique, I would say, the unique way of predicting the future.
He's a hockey player, so he goes where the puck is.
Yeah, but I mean, but it was either it was like an accident or something. But what it was for me is like he exactly knew the next step is this and this, and he predicted the iPod. And the only theory I have is we as developers, we really usually glad what works right now. So if we get an iPod, we are really excited about that. It's like, wow, you can play music. And for him, was an iPod just a thing? And say, okay, what is the next thing? I think this is the only explanation I have.
Yeah, I mean, he was. I think he has a lot of things going for him. He understands. He can talk to developers. Developers trust him. That's the key thing, right? Also, is like you can try to be curious about what comes next, try to understand, but for that you need to be able to talk to people who actually get the technology and earn their trust. And he was very well respected
Yeah.
among a community of engineers, which we thought of him as an engineer, really. I know he was driving the company, but he was just a nice guy and smart.
Yeah, yeah, and I really liked his keynotes. So they were just amazing. So it was always fun with him.
Oh yeah, 10 reasons why.
Yeah, yeah, I exactly remember that. And perfect. So two questions. What I forgot to ask you. You remember the first Java version you worked with, the applets?
Um, so it was whatever was actually I had a JDK
Yes.
1.0 clearly
Mm-hmm.
installed locally, and there was something else bundled in Netscape, which was the beginning for me of the run once, write once, run anywhere doesn't always deliver. We need to be careful with that promise. I forgot what version it was, but it was not the one I had when developing.
I changed actually the slogan is on my slides. Learn once, never migrate. This works.
Yeah, and I remember the tools I used back then. I know, was it JBuilder or something like that? It was.
JBuilder was later, but JBuilder was great. And there was Java Studio Workshop was the first IDE.
Oh, I remember that. It had shadow classes. It had this horrible generated classes that made the app like 10x what it should be.
Yeah, but the UI was nice
Oh
for
yeah,
for
yeah,
that time. So I was fascinated by it.
yeah.
And Java Studio Workshop was the Java Beans connecting stuff, which is
Right.
really amazing.
Well, there were no Java Beans back in the days. That came later.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, cool. So you joined then Sun, and when was it?
so this was 1998.
Wow! So you were one of the first. So I did an interview with Josh Marinacci. It was
Oh, yeah.
the same year, I would say. So,
Yep.
so you're one of the first Sun employees in USA, right? Or in France?
No, I always worked in France. I've always been based here. May travel quite a bit to the US quite often, but I was always based here. So I was probably one of the first ones doing Java, certainly here in France.
So, and you were like advocate, evangelist, or developer
Um,
relations?
no, so in the early days, I was what we call a pre-sales person. So I was working with customers. So I alternated between two jobs. One was professional services, actually going and writing software for customers.
Mhm.
And then pre-sales, which is everything that happens before you actually make a sale. And these were projects where It involved software, which was clearly Java, and hardware. And why trying to make the case that Java on Solaris was the best solution, and working with partners such as BA or even IBM at sometimes make the case that this is the best stack for the customers back in the days.
Hey, cool. So you were server side then, right? Mainly on servers.
Yeah, service, yeah, and server. Yeah,
Server.
never really did a lot of mobile or anything like that.
So you started with Sun Java Server. What is JWS? Java Web Server. You started with that?
Yeah, I don't think any customer actually used that. That was early days, because then soon enough we had the Sun Netscape Alliance with all the Netscape suite of products.
Mm-hmm.
So the Netscape Web Server, Enterprise Server, whatever it was called, was really an amazing product, and it came with a really good JVM embedded with a servlet container. Mm-hmm. So I remember that part way more than
I used the JWS, which is the predecessor of, for strange reason, of IBM WebSphere. So I attended 1 year later the conference in Germany, is Systems was called, and IBM presented the WebSphere, the first edition, and they look exactly the same. Like the JWS, no, is a little bit more expensive. So the Sun version was $400, I remember, because I paid by myself, and the other one was $5,000. It would be interesting to find out what is the story behind, because this was like crazy. It's like, why it looks identical, the same applet was just red, and the Sun was, I forgot the color, but it was applet management, and I used that in production actually in many projects. And the unique, I don't know whether you know, but the Netscape server supported server-side JavaScript.
Oh, yeah, Livewire.
I don't know the name of it, but it was JavaScript, server-side JavaScript.
I know. It's like Node before V8.
Yeah. And now the funny story. I got a contract, a larger one, to migrate a server-side JavaScript to Java, because it was around, I would say, 2004. Because the company claimed no one would like to have JavaScript on the server, and they will never able to sell the product. It works, it's fine, but they really have to use Java. And we migrated. I think I helped them to migrate. I teach them Java first, and then we did some proof of concepts, and then they achieved to migrate to Java. And I don't know whether they are happy right now, but this is actually really funny. So Sun Netscape, they were way ahead of time, if you think about this, and the history repeats.
Oh yeah, and what a silly idea to run JavaScript on the server side, right?
Yeah.
Nobody would do.
Developers don't like it, right? Okay, cool. So you did the Netscape stuff, and Netscape was renamed to iPlanet, right?
Yeah, it was a joint venture between AOL and Sun, and
AOL?
I was not part of that joint venture. I was on the Sun side. It was a bit more complicated, but clearly we didn't have middleware other than this privileged partner we were working with, which was iPlanet, yes, as you say, which had everything from web server to app server to a lot of identity products, LDAP servers, and SSO and so forth. Spent quite a bit of time working with them and working with customers. It wasn't the best experience from an app server Java perspective, because iPlanet app server wasn't exactly the most popular one, but it was a good learning experience.
Okay, and then what happened then? So you spent time with iPlanet. The next one was.
Oh, and then so the next thing was I actually was a bit frustrated that again iPlanet app server was not the best one, or even close to being the best one. So when we decided at Sun that we would make a production version of our reference implementation and call it Glassfish, I was like super excited. And I actually knew people on the team, so I knew it was coming. I knew it would actually have legs. And I joined the team eventually after a few months of the thing being live. Worked with amazing people there, and that's where we probably met. And I had this initially, evangelist maybe role or community manager. I don't pay too much attention to titles, but essentially, yes, this is working with communities showing them what we have, taking feedback in, going back to the engineering team, and trying to make the product better, and then have that virtuous circle going.
Yeah, for me it was like a startup inside Sun. Your team. That was
Yeah,
amazing.
it was great. It was great because we were on to something. We achieved quite a few things. To go back to your initial question on Java dash jar glassfish, that was my demo, and it blew a few people's minds because the thing would actually start faster than Tomcat back in the days. That was like folks had never seen that. It had a modular architecture, so this is really funny because now we talk
HK2,
about
right?
HK2, yeah.
Yeah. And this was
Um,
written by Jerome, I think,
yep,
right? This is
absolutely.
also a French
Jerome is the
guy. So
architect.
was it like the core Glassfish was developed in France or by French developers?
Yeah, there was a French
Connection.
connection there,
Okay.
but no, most of it was developed in Santa Clara.
Okay.
There were a few French folks or French francophones actually.
Before you proceed with the Java minus jar, what I thought is that the Glassfish was initially based on how it's called Sun One server, but you not the reference implementation. And but
No,
this,
this is really the reference implementation that we had to ship as part of, as you know, at least back in the days, a specification was not enough. You needed a TCK and a reference implementation. And the reference implementation, most of the time, was not production quality. It was like just implementing barely the spec.
yeah, it was terrible. So I actually used that. It was like Swing application even, where you
Yep.
can deploy
Yeah.
from that. I used that in the Sun trainings.
Yep.
Okay, so
So, I mean, I don't know how much was actually reused. Because HK2 was something new. Clearly, there was no modularity in the thing you're talking about, that Swing UI, where it would take forever to build a WAR or a near file and spit it
yeah,
out and deploy it. I remember trying to dance around the 5-minute deploy time locally while presenting this to customers. So a lot was rewritten, but it was the same team basically that was like, look, we did it once. How about we do it again? Only this time the goal is to make something that's production quality, include, of course, open source. And open source, a lot of people remember Sun for being, an open source champion, but at the time was still kind of new. And building a community is not just about throwing code over the wall. And there was no GitHub at the time, so it was java.net. And having the code there is not enough. You need to engage people, you need to have it's license is one thing, the whole IP and the governance is another, and you need to be clear about how you run your project, and that was part of my job also with a number of other people.
yeah. What you achieved back then is it was quite actually amazing. Still, because of your evangelism or of your team's evangelism, the glassfish is still one of the most popular in Europe. So because then whitefly caught a little bit up, but now Payara guys are doing a great work with glassfish, and
Yep.
because of the very smart combination with microprofile, it takes off again. So it's just like, but this was based, on the early, I was at 2007, right? This was the time frame where there will be the alien glassfish, I would say.
Yeah, I think we moved the industry in a sense. Like JBoss was our competitor. We saw them as a competitor, not really WebLogic and WebSphere, and they had some modularity going on, but it was not as elegant, I would say, as Glassfish. Certainly would not have all the lazy loading features and fast startup and only start what you need type of approach. Eventually they got there. They did a lot of things that we had done. So, and that's good. I mean, that's how the industry works. You move the needle, and then people start using Glassfish, but other people, competitors, take notice, and you know what they say about imitation. So I like that we push a lot of people to
Yeah.
evolve, and I mean the whole micro profile, the whole smaller footprint. Cloud-friendly approaches are nice. I remember actually delivering a presentation on Glassfish, which was how you can build your own Glassfish. Forget about Java EE. How can you just take your only the modules that you need? So you make it really small, so maybe you can use it in embedded systems, for example. And that didn't resonate too well at the time, but at least the technology was there. I've always been fascinated by modularity. I think that started with NetBeans actually. For the longest time, NetBeans to me was just an IDE, a really good one, which I still use from time to time. But then a bank here called me saying, we would like some consulting on NetBeans. I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, show you where to click? Like, seriously. They're like, no, you don't get it. NetBeans as a UI platform. And this is where I discovered NetBeans platform, which the IDE is based on, and which has really nice concepts when it comes to modularity. And I got to meet the team in Prague that built this. I had no idea how to help that customer. So I flew those people in from Prague. So Yarda, Trung, really great people that had built this thing and really taught me a really good lesson on modularity and that helped me with the whole, modularity and with HK2, with OSGI, with Java modularity. It kind of was the foundation for me to understand everything that was to come.
And this is the modularity. This is one of the view contention points between the Glassfish team and my point of view. Because for me, modularity was OSGI. I associated OSGI, Eclipse. And this is OSGI is not always modularity is not always good or great for developer experience. And as Glassfish v2 was monolithic a little bit, and Glassfish v3 was modular, but the point was the first version of Glassfish v3 started actually slower because it had found all the plugins which have to be booted if you needed the full profile. And Glassfish v2 was faster. And in my projects, I always needed almost everything. So it was never worth to optimize. And it's still the case. So it's actually the same story as 10 years ago. So people ask me, why you're not using Payara Micro? I say, because there is not real difference. It's not like, to shave off 5 megs, it is worth, the risk to run your unique snowflake. And that is interesting. I think why I'm still using Java EE and the application servers is just because developer experience, I don't have to optimize. Yeah, I download one thing and I can, from the first minute, focus on business logic. I'm not that interested in optimization. I only optimize if I have to. And what you are talking about, that the Glassfish was able to be run highly optimal, which I think is very important for Glassfish developers and shouldn't be at all important for Glassfish users like I was. So I remember your team was excited, came to me, we have plugins, okay, who cares, right? Because I still will use, JAXRS and CDI and EJB. I need almost everything. So all plugins have to be booted, whether they are booted, sequentially or all at one on a tree manner. I actually don't care.
Right. I think you're right. To some extent, we were excited because to us it was an architectural choice that made the product and the code base future proof.
Yes.
So we could evolve much faster, include new features, and the trend was still to go to somewhat lighter weight. We still had the Tomcats and the Jetties of the world as somewhat competition, and we wanted to be able to compete with them for those that did have those needs. I mean, you clearly use Java EE containers. Other folks were using barely servlets, and there's this whole trend of using Netty and not even using the servlet API nowadays. And Glassfish for that, I mean, the choices made back then, which is what was 10 years ago, still apply. Yeah. So you're right. It's more on the implementation side, and you shouldn't have to care too much.
What you said, that I'm running Java EE containers, but the reason is what I saw. What actually lots of projects were happened the following. I think it was called lightweight runtimes or whatever back then, and people run Tomcat usually in Europe, sometimes Jetty, not Netty, and they were really happy about having thin runtime on the server. And what they shipped was like in one project in Switzerland, 500 megs war. So, and for me, it was crazy. It's like, what you are doing is not lightweight at all. Why you're not making your server bigger and your deployable smaller? Because I have to build, 50 times a day, and I build the server only once. So for me, I never got it. Why someone is really interested in having, small runtimes, and with the trade-off of building a huge thing and how it's called, Uberjar, Fatjar, and back then we had, Fed wars, and they spend all the time daily, and they're really proud of small servers.
Right. So I think one of the use cases for that was testing, where you could test with a single command line. Yeah, you would say java-jar -jar glassfish jar and your var, and that would start the runtime, and then you could start exercising it with tests. People took it farther and put this in production. No, I agree. I mean, if you look at what's going on nowadays with serverless, it's like, give me your code, please don't, and limit the number of dependencies you have in terms of modules and jars and everything, no matter what language you use, because otherwise this will have an impact, and those cold startup times will hit you. So eventually, I think people are getting the whole, if you focus on code, really do focus on code, not on the runtime. But I mean, Spring having had the success that it had, a lot of people are still into fat jars.
The funny. There was another conference, I think in September, October in Germany, JCon, and I just I got the keynote, which is a little bit dangerous, giving me a keynote because I coded again. And what I did then, I started a OpenShift, like a private cloud, and shipped some containers and scaled them. And people were amazed. They came to me and say, what you did, what was it? Why it was so fast? It's like, I don't know what you are talking about. It's just stock full profile Java E, and it always did fast. And they say, and what was it? I say, Docker and OpenShift, a little bit Kubernetes, and I mean, wrapped in a nice package, but it behind the scene there's HA proxy, Kubernetes, and Docker, and it was Whitefly back then. And they say, because in our case it takes forever. We have to build a jar and it scans everything. So I don't. They ask me why they are using Uberjar. Like, I have no idea why you are using Uberjar, right? And this is like funny stuff. So it seems like now that the Java E is very fast and thin. And if you build the Uber jars, you end up shipping, the whole runtime over and over again. And therefore, I had also interesting conversation with the Swarm guys, the Thorntail at Code One right now. And they attended my session and told them, I don't see the point. I don't know any project who is interested in building, the runtime 50 times a day and shipping one jar. I mean, we have Docker. Who cares how the command looks like in a Docker?
I was going
just,
to
get no one cares about that, and they couldn't tell me, what is the killer use case. And if there is no killer use case, I'm absolutely not interested in it.
Right.
You had the same conversation with Payara Micro and Steve Milic. He told me, they have it, but it's actually there is no difference.
Right. So I think Docker changed drastically the conversation, and you're right. I mean, we now have a packaging mechanism. It's called Docker, Docker file. And there are ways to write it, so we take better advantage of the caching that there is. So yeah, I think each tool should do what it's really good at. So you might have dependencies. I mean, the whole problem with modularity is dependencies. Sometimes you're like, I like having dependencies because that's code I don't have to maintain or write. But then you do have to manage those dependencies, and you might carry along a lot of stuff that you don't really understand. You're not sure how it's going to evolve. So sometimes you might have been better off not having those dependencies and maybe rewriting the small portion that you really needed. This is where people like you come into play. It's like you take a deep breath and look at this from an external point of view. Like, you're not tainted by the history and the legacy and the craft that accumulated over the years in an organization or on a project. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's technical debt that you look at and that others can't see. But no, that's something, that's an exercise that
What I
needs.
think is the my way of thinking is like it leads to boring projects because you get everything and you are done. So even Maven POM is trivial. You don't have to care about anything. You have to start with coding, and this even disturbs some enterprise projects because even the business department is not is not ready to deliver the use cases actually from the day one. So even there, they would like to have some warm up, but we don't need any warm up anymore. So we can
Mhm.
deliver quickly. And what developer actually love, I saw it at the DevOps yesterday, is like some new framework which does a little bit more something differently, and they love it because it's more fun. And I think this is the problem, right? So if you have a mature technology, no one is interested in it. It is far better to invent a new language which is half as robust as the old one, just to make the research again.
Right. Well,
I
yeah,
think,
you may be right. I mean, we keep reinventing the wheel, but the wheel is slightly different every time.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. Like languages are all different, and I learned a lot from, I thought by working at Sun, I was like at the center of the earth. Like I would see all the partners, all the software vendors, all the, and there was this phase where we started talking about Ruby being the next great thing, and then and I thought I knew of a lot of different developers and communities and everything. And when I joined Google, I realized that I really didn't. The whole web community is just different. The Go community is different. The Python community is different. Like I was seeing how the web community was just discovering, this was 2012, continuous integration. They were like, to us, and having worked with Kosuke, who started Jenkins, we were on the same team. He was on the Glassfish team. To me, it was like, gee, you're just seeing the light now. But yeah, I mean, different communities move at different pace and based on their needs. So I don't know that we're reinventing everything and everything needs to be boring. I realize we shouldn't be always reinventing everything. The boring stuff actually is the stuff that gets you productive.
regarding Go, someone asked me which JVM language would I learn now if I had time, and my answer was I wouldn't learn any JVM language because why I should. I mean, I know Java, and when I would learn something, then it's completely different with complete different use case. And what I mentioned is, for instance, Go. And the reason for that is because I could write, system tools on Linux, running on Linux very efficiently, and ship one binary, which is very compatible with my point of view. Just ship one thing, and there is, and it runs. And this is something different, and I see clear the added value. But what I get questioned is, could we do the enterprise project with Kotlin? It's like, sure, we could. But then I get the question why we don't do it with Scala, Groovy, or whatever, or Clojure, and I don't think we will ship earlier with Kotlin. But with
Yeah.
Go, then I see the use case. So you could, if you have different, I would say, different use cases or different challenges, then you can use complete different language, and then be more efficient from the beginning, because this is complete different, how to call it, paradigma.
Yeah, I think Java still is amazingly popular, but at the same time suffers from an image of being,
Enterprisey.
enterprisey and ceremonial and verbose. Whether that's true or not, it's probably not as true as people think, especially if you look at the most recent versions of Java. I mean, people still make fun of EJBs because there used to be this super complex thing. Um, and so we kind of have to fight that to as a Java community to make sure the young folks actually understand the value of Java. So was it
Yeah, what's surprising, young folks, startups. I don't know how they found me. So some startups came to me, and I showed them really what I usually, so hello world with application server and cloud deployment. and say, what is it? It's like, we call it Java E or application servers, but don't look it up on the internet. You will find heavyweight, whatever. Just try it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
there was no single use case or single project where they said they rejected that. They used to know CDI, EGB, whatever it was necessary without knowing what it actually is. So that it was that simple and it worked. It was a few lines of code and we had the prototype. So this is a good testament for it. And yes, this was actually a nice story. Yesterday at Devox, I delivered a talk about Jakarta E micro profile and stuff like that. And before the session, we had 10 minutes. So I asked the attendees, could you please, if you have questions, just ask now. And one attendee asked what he has to install to follow me. So, okay, the best is to Java 8, Maven, and Payara. And what happened is, before the session, he installed the whole enterprise development environment, hacked with me. And after the session, he came to me and said, look, it doesn't work because I cannot see this. And what he just did is just renamed the war to a different name. And the URI didn't match, right? And I say, this is great. And what you are building? Are you a Spring developer? No. What is Spring? I have no idea. I was like, what are you doing? I did a little bit of Scala. And this is actually amazing, that a developer without enterprise background could hack with me, along with me, a microservice during Devox.
Yeah.
Cool. So we actually covered a lot of glassfish. And you mentioned something about languages. What interests me, if you can say that, what is the ratio between Java and the other languages in Google Cloud, for instance? Do you have an idea, rough idea? So how popular Java at Google really is in the cloud?
So we have different offerings. We have AppEngine that recently celebrated 10 years. And Java was not the first language; it was the second after Python.
Yeah.
And it remains. It's probably Python and Java are still up there as the top languages for AppEngine by a long margin. I mean, there's PHP, there's Go. We have Node now, but Java is still very widely used. I don't know what the trend is. I could look it up. Still very popular. We recently added Java 8 support. So recently Java 8. That's not the most recent, but that's where we're at. We're obviously looking at the future as well. It's still very popular. It's hard for us to cater to all the developers to make sure what we have to offer is idiomatic, that we have everything built with Maven and Gradle for Java developers, and we have the equivalent for other languages. So it's not just keeping up with a given, version of the VM. It's about integrating with, what developers find natural to use in their environment. No, Java is still very much for AppEngine. Very, very much used. We use it in many other places. Like we have this big data tool. It's called Dataflow, which is based on a open source project called Apache Beam, which is all about manipulating data and writing a data pipeline that will work both in batch and streaming mode. And that is native Java. That was written in Java. We did the Python version after that. There's a lot of and of course, every tool that we have has a Java SDK to it. We also have the Python Go and so forth. Java is still pretty much there. One thing we don't currently have is Java support in functions. So the function as a service approach. We currently support Python and Node, but the future might look a bit different.
Yeah. Can you also tell us what's the backend services? What's the implementation? You know that? Can you tell us? So what is the ratio between Java and other languages at Google?
There's a lot of Java. So if you remember when Sun shipped Java 5, after that, Sun lost a good number of key engineers from the Java team, and most of them went to Google. So this was the beginning, I understand, I wasn't there, I was still at Sun, of a lot of rewrite of code of products you use every day to Java. So the Java code base is huge at Google. Like I would say 1 in 2 products that you use has a Java backend. I'm not sure which ones we communicate about on, but I mean, as you know, we have a single repo for all the product that we have, and the Java code there is huge. We have a team maintaining Java libraries, maintaining the VMs that we use, or the VM that we use for all of this. That's the same team that put out Guava and a good number of other frameworks and libraries. So the Java investment at Google is still very strong.
We forgot to mention that you are working right now for Google, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you work for Sun, then briefly for Oracle?
Yes, I went through the acquisition. I was still part of Glassfish, and Glassfish, because of its reference implementation nature that it had kept, it became a open source and production quality, but it was still a reference implementation. We were kind of safe, I would say, although we joined a company that was selling WebLogic and that had built its entire ERP solutions on WebLogic. So I stayed there for a couple of years and eventually joined Google for a role that was very similar to what I had before, which was developer relations.
So how the working environments are comparable, Sun and Google? Is a similar atmosphere or?
Well, to start with, there are a lot of common engineers. Like,
yeah,
I didn't have to rebuild my entire network when joining Google. I actually knew some of the folks, and you mentioned Jerome as the architect of Glassfish. He works at Google. You probably know Ludovic.
Yeah.
He's one of the people who works on AppEngines and specifically the Java part. So we have an interesting conversation on a regular basis on where it's all headed. So a lot of similarities. It's interesting because, Sun was this company that was selling hardware, but also doing Java and amazing stuff. But we never made a whole lot of money selling Java. That was interesting. And Google and cloud specifically is a little bit different in the sense that we actually have a business selling cloud, and it's a very healthy business. So it started off as we didn't really do cloud at Google. We just had this AppEngine stuff that people don't really understood because people wanted VMs, and we were telling them, no, you just give us your code. And they're like, what? And it had constraints on the things you could and could not do. That was
similar
really
to Lambda, right?
Yes.
A little bit. So
no, completely. I mean, AppEngine is serverless, if you ask me. I mean, it scales to 0. You pay for what you use. And we recently were able to lift most of the constraints. Like, we used to have a white list of classes you can use, and everything else you could not use. That is gone because we rewrote the underlying stack and the way we isolate this from everything else. Yeah, I mean, back to your question, Sun and Google have a lot in common. It's interesting.
Yeah, good to know. So now there was a fluffy chat right now, right? So we talk about the early days of enterprise Java. So what we should do, I think, the idea would be, let's say I have a Java EE application, Glassfish. It has a JAX-RS endpoint, so we have some request JSON object coming in. Then we get, let's say, EJB, which starts the transaction but is optional. And then we have a couple of Java classes and then JPA, which is the database. Right. Now, let's say we go crazy for unknown reasons. So let's say this CRUD that is not enough in one scale. And now I would like to re-architecture this to Google Cloud. So now I think it could be valuable, no, to show the options from the architectural perspective.
Sure.
So in the backend, we have different go from the data to front end, I would say, right? Or just do the same from the same flow from the beginning to the end. So we need first a component which receives HTTP requests, parses it, and does something with it. What would it be in the Google Cloud?
Oh, that would be JAX-RS, because like we used to have something called Cloud Endpoints, which in its first version was, Google-specific annotations, which were very similar to JAX-RS, but
Yeah.
it was different. The latest version of Endpoints is something where you tell us what the shape of your API is. You describe it, typically with OpenAPI. And whatever you use as an implementation is fine. We will just, on top of that, do all the quality of service, the security, the logging, the monitoring, all of this.
So wait a second. What I will ship to you? OpenAPI endpoint or Java code or what? So the endpoint, what is it?
Oh, the endpoint is Java code. It's JAX-RS.
So I could ship a Java class annotated with path and get?
Yep, absolutely.
So what would be the input and output parameter? JSON object or something specific? Or string,
No,
you know?
It's really whatever you'd like. And then you just give us the description in the form of OpenAPI. And that's how we know where to place interception points, so we can apply security, quotas and all of these things.
This is actually interesting, because then I could start with Java 8. If I do this JAX-RS micro profile, will generate for me this OpenAPI document.
Yep.
I can give it to you.
Yep.
You will generate the endpoint and then call me. What I don't understand still, the JSON ASCII will have to be deserialized and serialized to JSON B or JSON P or Jackson or whatever. You know what to do then? Do I get a string or stream or object?
So on which side?
On your side. So I mean, I have a Java code, and if I have JAX-RS, it returns response or a Java object, or it could be a stream. But let's say I played a little bit with the FN project, which is open source, and in this particular case, either I return string, or I will have to convert the stream to JSON object, by myself. So the API to the function is a stream or string. So the question, do you know how it works in your case? So the parameters of the JAX-RS are the strings, Java objects?
So I mean, it's exactly as if you like. This is okay. So your JAX-RS code would typically, in this case, run on AppEngine, and AppEngine runs on Jetty. So it's just like a hosted Jetty that scales for you, and that
okay.
has
then I know it. So if it's a Jetty, is this like just plain JAX-RS? And then I can use my message body reader and writer to serialize and deserialize the objects.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So you don't have nothing built in, so like JSON. So it's like a plain JAX-RS endpoint.
Right. In this case, like, we don't do much other than provide.
Perfect. No, it's just to understand. So we have JAX-RS endpoint, so no problem. This integration of JSON B on JSON P is easy. It's like I would say 20 lines of code, so it's easy. Then I suppose there would be no dependency injection.
No, you can have dependency injection.
Why? So you provide it for me?
No. You bring your own CDI implementation.
Okay. So also not a problem. So this is actually great, because what I did, I started the whole server in a Lambda function, and this was fast enough. So with Java 8, you can actually boot CDI with 2 lines. Right. It keeps. I would say it takes half a second or whatever. The JAX-RS is not a problem. The serialization not a problem. So I can bring my libraries with me and have add injection is what I need from my JAX-RS using stock weld.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Yeah, but this will be a little bit boring. So let's say we don't like the dependency injection, because we will end up having application server. We could, for instance, now parse the object, call a Java class. Let's say with dependency injection, let's keep the injection there. And the Java class just validates the input and then passes this to a queue, let's say. What would be the queue in Google Cloud?
So the queue in Google Cloud is a managed PubSub service.
Managed, and what is it,
It's called PubSub.
Is this really, with proprietary API?
That in this case it is, yes.
Yeah, but this is like the code a little bit, how it will look like PubSub get instance, just a pseudocode.
Yeah. It's topics. So you subscribe to a topic. There are messages being posted. You consume a message. It's very JMS like.
Okay, so you get like a singleton manager, and then you can ask for a topic and send a string or whatever to the topic.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
And the difference here is that the way you get to that topic is because it's a managed and global service, there's no scoping other than the name, which is global to all of Google Cloud. So no matter what region, zone you're in, there's only one system. So it's kind of like we'll get to the database part, but typically you get service. So you say something like data store gets service or PubSub gets service, and there are no parameters. There's no like connection string with this is my instance of it. You're talking to one instance that's global, and you get to your own data, and then there's control lists that come into play and security, but the system is global.
Okay, so there is like a DNS name. Should be unique. Done.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Just like buckets in storage are uniques.
So then we have how it's called, the endpoint was the first service, right?
Mm-hmm.
Endpoints talking to, what is the Google name of the next one? Was the
PubSub.
PubSub. Okay, then I have it in a PubSub. Can I define, for instance, back pressure on something like this, or similar to JMS, or is just infinite? You know this topic, or are the parameters similar? This is the question, just.
Yeah, so in this case, you have to get into some of the specifics of PubSub. It's a very simple API. No, there's no back pressure there. Mm-hmm. It's really infinite.
And is it persistent?
It's not persistent. Well, there's time to live for the messages. It's not something you should use as a database.
Oh, no, of course
really
not. But is it reliable messaging, like persistent?
Oh, it's completely reliable. That's the kind of thing we're pretty good at. But some people had the tendency of using this as a persistent store.
No, this is Kafka. This is like,
yeah, exactly. Well, Kafka is what other people use when they need the ecosystem that comes with Kafka, or some of the features that make maybe persistent stuff better than PubSub is. But otherwise, it's very similar.
Very cool. So the data type is string, right?
Yes.
Okay. So on the other side, someone will have to consume the message.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be the function, or what?
The function is a very natural use case, because a function is triggered on certain events, and messages being posted to a queue in PubSub is one of those events.
Yeah, exactly. So in my Java E world, it would be a message-driven bean. But let's take functions, because we didn't cover them now. Could it be also Java class, which listen to this?
Unfortunately, we don't support Java in functions.
Not in functions, but somewhere else? Let's say if I would have AppEngine or another Google service, could I subscribe to the queue?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So which service would it be? AppEngine?
Yeah, that would be AppEngine, yeah.
And the AppEngine, the class would be started by AppEngine and subscribe to the PubSub queue. Or is it queue? Topic. PubSub is topic. Topic. And wake up whenever something arrives, right?
That's right. And AppEngine has this nice way of separating different parts of code into what we call services. Which means you can have different versions, different ways of scaling it, deploying only one version. So
this is almost a Lambda.
Yeah. I mean,
from the architectural perspective, it's a different name, but I could have a service which wakes up and calls AppEngine, or I could have a Lambda. It's not called Lambda function, Cloud function. What's the name?
Cloud function. Yeah.
Cloud function. I could have a Cloud function which wakes up and does something else. So let's say the Cloud function, what you're supporting right now, JavaScript
and Python.
Yeah, let's say JavaScript.
Yeah.
Then JavaScript is activated and processes the message and stores it in a queue again. And then we have AppEngine, which processes that. And now we would like to talk to a database. Mm-hmm. So as a Java developer, we have another AppEngine service which gets the process message by the Google Cloud function. Right. And now I would like to write it to a database. What I would use, let's say the coolest probably is Cloud Spanner, right?
Oh, that's certainly, yeah. Well,
which option do I have?
But come on, we're back to new stuff and new shiny tools that may or may not be super useful and boring. I mean, it's amazing technology, but the chances that you need this to start with are fairly low. We're talking about a distributed relational database that scales globally.
Yeah, with a nice JDBC driver.
Yeah, we finally have one. It took us a little while. We announced the technology. We had a number of things you could do with it, but we didn't have the GDBC, the read write GDBC driver, which we do now, as of just a few months ago.
So as actually, I could even use JPA to map it to Cloud Spanner.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, but no, Cloud Spanner could be an overkill for my CRUD. Let's say I'm a startup with a guest book, and
Right.
what would be the other option?
So the native option for AppEngine and for Java used to be, or still is to some extent, data store, which is the NoSQL solution. And the reason that was very popular for a long time and still is in many cases is that it supports versioning very well. One of the features AppEngine provides is the ability to version your services and your app, and to have multiple versions running at the same time. So you can do canary deployments, you can do A/B testing, you could do all sorts of really nice, really fun stuff with traffic splitting. And that also would work at the database level because
wait a second. So now the hard question to you. I don't know whether it's possible at all, but just we talk about that we have the messages in the topic, and they are consumed by a service attached to cloud to AppEngine. The question now is, can you do canary deployment as well? So you have two versions, listens to the same pub sub queue. Can I redistribute the traffic between the two versions as well? You know what I mean? So because we don't have a load balancer in between, we just have the pub sub topic, and then two listeners with different versions.
Well, if they both listen to the same topic and they can both consume the same message.
Yeah, but then we get like the same distribution, right? So we cannot tell, the version 2 gets more traffic than version 1.
Oh yeah. In that case, yes, you would have to either have different queues or have a different payload that
Yeah, of course, routing. So what you are referring here to the canary deployment is if we can do it with the AppEngine, which is directly accessed from HTTP, for instance, right? Because then you have the load balancer. So whatever is behind the load balancer, we can have it.
Yep.
Does it also work for the endpoints?
Yes, it does.
Oh, very good. So what it means is from the cloud architecture, whatever is behind a load balancer can have different versions deployed at the same time with Blean GRU deployment, Canary, and Canary means we have like A/B testing and stuff like that, right?
Well, Canary is like you deploy a new version, you're not sure it's going to go well. You have you route 5% of the traffic there, you look at the logs, and you go from 10% to 50 to 100 if all goes well.
Yeah. The question is whether the bird in the coal mine survives. This is the Canary test. Very good. Okay, now the data store. This interests me. You said this is NoSQL. So is it a document store? Is this like a hash map?
It's a document store. It's key value pairs. It's the API is very basic. It supports transactions, and obviously, as NoSQL, it scales very well. But it has eventual consistency, which can be very troubling for Java developers. And it also doesn't have JPA-like ORMs, or at least there is one that's developed by the community, like we don't maintain, and it's different for every language. There's one for Java. It's called Objectify. Very similar to JPA or Hibernate. But it was built with data store in mind, so NoSQL documents and eventual consistency and the transaction notion that we have there. So there's a little bit of learning curve for this one.
Okay, but if I interact as a Java developer with that, what I sending? Do I send strings with encoded JSON objects, or I get something like a hash map?
So there's a low-level data store API, which is really gets inputs of strings.
Or bytes, even, I guess.
Yeah, or bytes, anything. And there's the higher level approach, the ORM approach, where you manipulate objects, and that's the Objectify framework I mentioned, which is super popular.
Okay.
So that's NoSQL, but we obviously also have SQL options. So we have this thing called Cloud SQL, which is our way of managing either a MySQL or a Postgres
Oh, very good.
instance for you.
Hmm.
These are the two options.
Are they also clustered?
Yes, we offer HA,
Hmm.
and we take care of it. So the
And
kind
hot
of thing.
standby, something like hot standby, you know it?
So we have different approaches for MySQL and for Postgres, but both of them have either active or standby.
Yeah, because why I'm asking standby, what we could do then, write to one database and read from the other, from scalability. This was the
Yeah.
question. Yeah.
So yeah, and typically this is where you would use any JDBC plus JPA solution that you currently have and be able to talk to it. And we take care of the availability of the instance and the integrity of the data and hopefully the performance is good enough for what
Yeah.
you do. Typically you choose an instance size and you can say like I need a bigger one and swap this to a bigger machine. But eventually you might run into the scalability limitations of typical SQL databases. And you will have at that point either to start charting your data or move to Cloud Spanner. That's
Yeah.
where typically, if you want to stay with SQL, Spanner is great for that.
Any options which we didn't cover so far, which are interesting for such a case?
Well, there are many other options of databases. We have too many. We even have a flowchart to help you decide which one you should be using. If you have a lot of throughput, we have this thing called Bigtable, which is HBase essentially, which is fully managed, something we've been using for the longest time at Google. We have this other thing called BigQuery, which is really for analytics. So the typical use case is logs, something that you write once, you never touch again. And then
one question then. What we also could do with our guest book, the guest book could write to, let's say, the simple data store. And could you then have something like a trigger, which then reads the data and writes it to HBase, which is then analyzed by BigQuery, for instance, So like that you can connect.
Yeah, we even have like really simple options that will make copies of everything you have in data store into like export this to BigQuery directly. You don't even have to go through the Bigtable step.
Okay.
There's a lot of export to BigQuery options in almost all the products we have because BigQuery is such a powerful, it's like, give me data, give me a query, an SQL query, and I'll return a result in reasonable time, no matter what the how much data you have. Like, could be petabytes of data. We do brute force replication of data so that the result is given to you in a matter of seconds, as opposed to like having like a whole data warehouse to set up. So no cluster, no nothing. It's serverless. It's just serverless data in this case.
Cool. So the point is, it wouldn't be actually that different, right? So if we just explode a Java EE application to Google infrastructure, we will find for every piece or for every component something, one-to-one relation. The biggest job is the front end, because then I have to play a little bit with Jaxores and CDI to make it usable. But then I can just use out-of-the-box Google technologies.
Right. I think it's that's what we're trying to do, is to make sure you can use the things you have and still, if they're cloud friendly, and I think everything we mentioned is cloud friendly. The database might have some scaling issues, but we know how to fix them. It might take more work, but all of these technologies are fairly cloud friendly. Like, if you don't have a lot of dependencies, then your modules and the scalability of AppEngine will just kick in, and you'll have no problem there. The details are important, and if you have too many dependencies and if you have long startup times, all of this can work, but will not work really well in the cloud. So you have to watch out for that.
The only task you have, right, is offer like Java functions, or provide like a subset of Java EE and the endpoint, right? If you would get Jaxores with prepared CDI and let's say JSON-B, it would be golden, because my deployable would be empty. There's nothing to do for me, and I can fully focus on the business logic. And I think what could be nice to have injectable services, right? So if I already are there, then I could inject, for instance, this data store from Google
Right.
or whatever, and then it would be like almost as as easy to use as Java E.
Well, so typically we have a factory method
Yeah, I know, but
because
factory we did 20 years ago.
yeah, I know, but since you run in the Google Cloud, you just say like get service, get data store service, and like no parameters, and you get a
Yeah,
reference
I saw
to
this. So the API is nice, but at inject service even nicer, right?
right.
Because it's easier to test. I don't have to with the get factory singleton in the unit test is a little bit painful.
Yeah.
If you do at inject, it's nicer. So this is, but this is actually almost nothing to do, right?
Right. No, this yeah, that would be fairly easy. I agree.
So you know what you have to do right now, right?
I know what the feedback is to the engineering team. That's
Yeah,
my work.
yeah. Perfect. So anything we didn't mention from the Google Cloud, which is interesting still for a Java E developer, not like the crazy machine learning stuff we can cover the next time, but more like what we missed in our request flow.
Yeah, well, it is still kind of relevant to even Java developers because we have Java APIs for all those machine learning APIs. But I think from a Java E perspective, like you could take the approach of serverless, App Engine functions, or because you're in a company that really has invested maybe already in Kubernetes and Docker and all of this, you should be looking at things like Istio, which are looking at bringing the services that AppEngine provides, such as the routing, the security between different components, the A/B testing, all of these things, bring that experience to stuff deployed on Kubernetes. Where a lot of Java E runtime and workloads run fairly well on Kubernetes, whether it's native Kubernetes or
yeah, this was now extreme, explosion. What they did refactoring. So we just refactored the application server into cloud native or Google products. But right, I forgot to ask you this. So you have also managed Kubernetes environment in Google Cloud?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, we started Kubernetes, so
we invented that.
Yeah, well, it's true. Yeah.
It's a perk. Yeah, I know. But so what I could do actually, I can also ship, Payara 5 or glassfish 3 in a Docker and behind a Kubernetes, and you will care over it. This would be actually my pragmatic approach, right?
Yeah. So it's funny because I wrote a blog piece recently, which was not Payara in this case, but I was intrigued by the Helidon project that Oracle started. So I'm like, and it has Docker support, so you could just jumpstart a project with Maven and generate a Docker file. So I was like, how about I deploy this to Kubernetes Engine, which is our hosted version of Kubernetes, and I wrote a small blog post about it, and I didn't even have to write a single line of YAML, and which is quite something given how prevalent YAML is in Kubernetes and this whole cloud native approach. So yeah, Kubernetes Engine is something that will take any Docker file, obviously, and run it and host it for you and make it available.
What's the name of the product?
It's called Google Kubernetes Engine. It used to be Container Engine, and it's Kubernetes, so everybody understands what it is.
Okay, perfect. Where people can find you on the internet?
Twitter. Alexis MP is probably the best place. And I do write a few things on Medium, but I maintain a Google Cloud This Week in Google Cloud newsletter weekly. Okay, so they might find that on Medium. We have a Google Cloud publication there.
What's with your blog? You have Bistro blog. Is still alive?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. I still like the name, so maybe eventually I'll revive it one way or another. But I know where should I blog nowadays? Like Google Plus is gone. Come on, where should I go?
Yeah.
Medium is like where folks hang out nowadays, I guess. And the other option is to like bring back and do as my colleague and friend Guillaume Laforge does, is host his blog on AppEngine.
Yeah.
And
blog about the architecture. So what I would do in your case, you create, what I actually do in my case as well. I have my blog on my server and I do everything by myself just for fun. And you should show, and the craziest block installation ever, the most scalable block on with Google Spanner functions just for fun, to use as much, Google technologies as possible to implement a block.
Yeah, and challenge the community to break it, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but it's smart community.
And so I can show you nice graphs and everything.
Yeah, perfect. So thank you. And what I would like to do with you is at one point in 2019, probably talk, about the other interesting machine learning services, stuff like that, and BigQuery or whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's super exciting. It's the place to be. Like, cloud is super fun.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.